this morning, really just a couple hours.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
We had, Robbie, we talked about, they brought up the notion of low-hanging fruit. I didn't see that on the minutes in relation to the minimal amount of uplighting we are allowed. I didn't see that. Did I read that in minutes?
I'm not remembering that issue.
I recall because I talked about it. Consultant brought up removal of low-hanging fruit, and then that was to remove any of the uplighting that we had in code. And I said, no, that's not a good issue.
If you, this is Clayton, if you look in the item titled Purpose and Intent Statement, there is an acknowledgement of that discussion regarding the intent statement was not intended to reduce the currently allowed uplighting. Does that address?
That will address my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
So when folks have time to review the minutes, legal action report, we're going to be within the motion. Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Give me a second. Second from Daniel. Discussion? No discussion. Let's have a call on that issue. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None opposed. So it passes. Next item on the agenda is our subcommittee report. And I don't know, Amy, would you like to offer that, or should I follow through with it?
You can offer it. The only thing I'm going to say is part of the reason I'm going to ask you to do that is because there are a number of people online who are not muted. The only person who should be unmuted is Christina at this time, and we're getting a lot of feedback, and it's kind of difficult to hear everything that's going on. So if we could get everybody muted, and then Dennis, if you'll go ahead and get that report, I think that'll be for the best while we're figuring out some of the sound challenges still here.
Okay, fine. Let me go ahead with our subcommittee reports. The subcommittee is Amy, myself, and Craig Barron, and we've been working towards an updated draft copy of the proposed outdoor lighting code. And we had a couple meetings between last full committee meeting and today, and the last meeting, which we had on May 1st, we really got into some technical issues, and there were a variety of things that we covered. I had some views on section 102.4.2. We think in subcommittee that what I offered, which is very minor word changes compared to what was in the previous draft, which was for February of 2025. It looks like our subcommittee is going to be recommending to go with those revisions. And the biggest difference between our old code is that we're going to be offering another exception for minor additions on larger sites that does not require the complete inventory of a full site. And essentially what it will be is the project can produce a developed area around the work area and calculate all the lumens within that and not have to calculate everything else. The counter to that is that the lighting that goes in will have to be 100% full cutoff, and any existing, or I should say fully shielded, and any existing lighting that is not fully shielded will have to be removed. And, but that would negate the need to do this full site inventory, which I think will be a good option that many people will take advantage of. We're retaining the ability to add small number of low lumen rated lights without doing the additional calculations like we had as the previous exception. And we've also clarified that if the outdoor lighting being added is fully shielded or under a canopy, and where it would have been calculated as lumens anyway, we don't have to do all of the full image. We just state that no. So I think those are things that will really improve the usability of the code and not put the burden on development. So that was discussed. We also talked about adding more definitions into the code to make sure that all the various terms would be defined, because we're still using terms within the technical requirements that really don't have a definition. That's ongoing work that we're doing. We've discussed about shielding requirements, and one issue that came up in particular is festoon lighting. And it feels like we're going to be recommending that when festoon lighting is used, unless it's calculated as unshielded light, it would have to have hoods put on the individual lamps that would essentially make it be a fully shielded installation.
And are those available also?
Yeah, we checked into that, and they're commercially available. We have not had any discussions about, well, we realized that we don't want to go into a location where we would be prohibiting unshielded lights. We're still going to have the allowance for some unshielded lights on projects. They would retain their certain lumen allowance, and they would still be subject to curfew, so they'd have to be separately controlled. And we've added a section to clarify control requirements so that if you're having the unshielded lighting, you'd have to have it on a separate control device from the general lighting, which would be otherwise allowed to run all night long. And that's from some experience in special inspections where we're seeing that isn't the case, and people say, well, we'll just turn all our light off. But in reality, that's not going to happen.
I interrupt you, don't.
Yes.
What is the curfew on the unshielded?
It's 11 p.m. That's
Recommended curfew.
well. It's going to be a required curfew.
Currently it's recommended, but.
Well, actually, right now there is a curfew in the 2012 code. It unshielded light has to be turned off. But we didn't elaborate on how to do that, and that's where the problem is, that sometimes the unshielded light and the shielded lighting is
that
on the
one's
same
me.
control
On
device.
here
So that
is
would be
the room.
turning off the general lighting to meet the curfew on unshielded.
The camera's not on.
Let's see, other things
Like-
this subcommittee it's a work in progress, and we're still working on the
Oh,
lumen
that's my
tables
camera.
and different ways to,
You know what I mean? Like that's this one.
to address the
That one
concerns with
is.
nanotechnology and protecting dark sky, all of those things. I don't think we're ready to present that right now. Our next subcommittee meeting, we're going to delve into it more. But one thing that's noteworthy, and if you want to, Craig, you can address it, but we're going to offer an optional table for residential that instead of requiring the arithmetic, it will just indicate the amount of lumens you can use on a property based on the property area. Now, this is for residential, which means single family and duplex only. Although we're also looking at definitions of that, and we've been hearing from the city that residential may grow to include up to 4 units. Or is it more than that?
Eightplex, right?
It could be as many as 8, but probably 4.
This is Clayton with the city. So we are working on a definition for residential. It's still being circulated a bit. It will most likely include up to 4 dwelling units, simply because that would be consistent with the state of Arizona's middle housing bill. And the city of Tucson is currently looking at potential revisions to the land use regulations, because that missing middle housing bill from the state of Arizona prohibits cities from requiring commercial development standards up to 4 dwelling units. So that's just as a bit of context, that's most likely where we will land, so that we can provide some consistency with other initiatives.
So as the code is at present, it's saying that residential is single family duplex. We're either going to work it into definition or a sub-note to the tables, but there will be a table that can be used for residential that, based on the lot size, it prescribes just the total lumens that you can use. So they don't have to say, well, now what do I have to multiply this by or that by? You can just look and say, oh, I have a half-acre lot. I'm in this lighting zone. I get this many lumens. And it's broken down of 1 acre, 3/4 acre, half acre, 1/3 acre, 1/4, 2.0, 0.15, 0.05, 0.03 acres. And for the total lumen caps will be presented to that. So we think that might improve the usability of the code, particularly for those small projects where you may not have as many experience in the lighting code designers working on projects.
So I've got a whole table here. The dark skies has a per dwelling lumen allowance residential use. And they've broken that down to acre all the way to the ones Dennis mentioned. So I applied a multiplier based upon what the dark skies put in, and then did that to what we currently have on ours. And it's pretty close. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty close to what dark skies. And in our subcommittee meeting, we talked about we want to get as close to dark skies as we can so that we make that group happy.
And where we're going to be going in subcommittee, and I'm hopeful that the next full committee meeting will have this wrapped up, is also trying to arrive at the final lumen per acre numbers for all the rest of the commercial zones. We're still working on a way to incentivize people to go to warmer light to eliminate the blue, because that's going to help the dark sky. And but still allowing people to go as cool as 3,000 Kelvin. So there may be a multiplier, or there may be a separate table if most of your lighting is a warmer source, like say 2,200 Kelvin, you get more lumens than if you're at 3,000 Kelvin. So that.
I'm sorry, can I mention something? So we're still having some technical difficulties over here, and people are having a hard time hearing us. I'll try to address that in the next meeting, but if you guys can just try to speak a little bit louder. And then if you could also say who you are before you start speaking, because they also can't see us.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at the feedback over here, and so this is Christina, Management Assistant Christina. If you guys could just state who you are before you talk, and I know that that's a pain. I'm sorry.
Okay, so this is Dennis. I'm the vice chair, and most of the comments have been coming from me on this subcommittee report. Essentially, that's where we were on the subcommittee. So are there any questions?
You gonna publish this in a paper form?
What we're working, this is Dennis again, what we're working on in subcommittee is to update a draft. And we'll have the draft then issued to the full committee. And if the full committee is happy with the draft, then I think it will go to general public for more comment before it gets, we make it be a formal recommendation to the voters. We have a question from Rick.
This is Rick Hollander, IAEI. Will the draft, as you're doing the updates, be posted so others can look at it, or just after when you're finished? Will be a continuous updating and posting, or is that something you have to wait until final draft is ready?
This is Dennis. I'm not certain, but at this point, the subcommittee does not have a revised draft. We're working on parts and pieces, and no, we're not publishing that. But our goal is to have all that integrated into a draft saying this is the subcommittee's work, at which point the full committee has to review that.
This is Craig. As far as I recall in conversations, public input is done. We're not getting this out to the public at all. If anybody goes to, of course, the city and the county, as well as the members of the committee, so that we can all look it over. But it wouldn't go out for public comment now, would it? Dan or?
This is Clayton. Once your draft is complete, it does need to go back out to the public.
Yeah.
But we do not have an open public comment period occurring right now. We're not actively receiving comments. But once your draft is complete, we will need to republish to the public.
Right.
Yeah, that's with mine.
But as we go on with these initial, layouts, once we've all done, this is Craig again, we're not going to put that down to anyone but committee until we have a final draft.
This is Rick. Were the comments that I submitted in time in that open public comment time frame?
This is Clayton with the City of Tucson. No, your comments have not been provided to the subcommittee yet. We've been focusing on the topics that have been covered during the previous meetings. So issues related to shielding, lumen limits, and definitions are what the subcommittee is currently working on to include the intent statement. All of those items that we identified last month are what the subcommittee has been working on.
Well, those comments that I did submit, will those eventually be submitted to the subcommittee for review?
Yes, sir.
I went through you. Okay.
Yeah, and you have, this is Craig Barron, you have those, Clayton?
I do. As was previously mentioned, the public comment period is not open, so we are not actively receiving comments from the public to include IAEI. So we're not active. We're trying to keep the subcommittee focused on their tasks at hand. And once we reopen a public comment period, then we'll bring those comments forward.
Richard.
So Richard Green from University of Arizona Scholar. It sounds like the simplification for residential property is a really good thing. Was there any concern about different usage needs if there were multiple units on the same parcel versus a single family dwelling?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is Craig Barron. Yeah, what this breaks down is all the way down to 0.03 of an acre. So it depends on, with tiny houses, you could probably put 8 of them on a half acre. So that would probably be around 0.05 of an acre. And so on that 0.05, it gives the tabulation as to what you could use depending on the zone in which you live. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, you're saying that if it's a single parcel, you subdivide it according to the units
Right.
that are on it.
Yeah, because
And then
one,
you have a limit.
yeah, because one developer's gonna put those 8 or 10 on that one little lot.
Mhm.
And then therefore, whatever that lot size is, that's what they get for all of those teeny houses on that lot.
Mr. Vice Chair, I believe Alec has a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Hey, everybody. This is Alex Zimmerman. Wanted to comment on some of the subcommittee notes, and I apologize if this isn't the right venue, but I'd like to address or have conversations about the exception 102.4.2. I know Dennis said that you guys were discussing it, but the 5 acres really limits when you're talking about those lighting area zones. So I don't know how that would work or if I'd be invited to the subcommittee to have those conversations, but I think that's an important topic from a design perspective.
Well, I think we can share our work with the committee. So what I could do, Alex, is I could send everyone my notes of what is being the current wording proposed. Instead of our one exception that we have now, which talks about properties of 5 acres or larger, we will now have another exception that doesn't have a stipulation about 5 acres. It's just an exception that says when we're doing a minor addition, which means 25% or less being altered, you could draw a developed area line around the area of the alteration and calculate compliance for that developed area that's been stated. So if you choose to draw a smaller developed area, you're going to get fewer lumens. If you draw a larger developed area on an existing site, you're more likely to take in more existing lighting. And that's what our thinking was, that whether you chose to take a larger area or a smaller area, but in all cases, it has to be the area of the work, of the project that's being done. But it's not got the 5 acre limitation, and it's not going to require a full inventory of an entire large site. That's where we think this thing. So let me go ahead and distribute this to the committee, and then you.
This is Alex Zimmerman. Dennis, I appreciate the explanation. That is definitely way more clear, and it makes sense to have the smaller boundaries and limited to scope of work, so you're not crossing boundaries for multiple projects and things like that. So I appreciate the additional explanation. I look forward to seeing the documentation you'll be providing.
And we have Amy's hand up as well. I kind of seen it come up and down.
It's okay. Yeah, that's while I was trying to solve problems, but because we have a couple of new committee members and we just had this question, I just want to take an opportunity to clarify that when we are meeting in subcommittee, we are not able to invite additional members of the full committee, as that creates quorum. So while we can send the documents out to the whole committee, and that does not create quorum, we are not able to sit in a room together. So we could meet, Rob or Alec. If you want to do that, you could meet with 1 or 2 members of the subcommittee, but not the whole subcommittee at a time. So we want to make sure we never create quorum.
Okay, this is Dennis again. I'm going to go ahead on the agenda to item 4, and that is definitions, residential and modification. And actually, Amy, you and Clayton put the agenda together, so I'm not certain what we're doing on this item, but I do know in subcommittee we talked about making sure we had definitions for both of those. Clayton touched on the residential already with regard to where we were going to the table, but I don't know if there's anything to add to that.
This is Clayton. Again, just pointing out that the city is looking at redefining residential to apply to a broad scope, which may include a definition that covers land use regulations and building regulations and outdoor lighting code to be consistent with current state bills coming forward. So we are still working on that, but it does appear that we are leaning towards 4 dwelling units per lot, unless we qualify under this proposed residential definition.
And this is Dennis. Let me add that in subcommittee, I think we were unanimously believing that our lighting code should be consistent with other codes and rules in cities with respect to what is residential and what isn't. So that's where we think we're going to go. Other item on that is definition of modification. I think we're going to try to make sure we've got those words developed. Do we have any comments?
Sorry, it's Amy. Just making sure everyone understands. So additionally, in the prior code, we didn't define all of the terms that are in the code. So one of the changes that we're making is ensuring that our glossary of important terms is fully updated and complete, as well as then going through and italicizing those terms throughout the code so that they're easy to find. So if you see a term italicized in the code now and you are not entirely sure what it means, you'll be able to flip to the glossary and find out what that means. Examples of terms that would seem obvious, but we maybe just didn't think about over time were light pollution. So that's one of those ones that will end up in the glossary and then will be italicized throughout the code so that you have that opportunity to make that connection and just make it a little bit easier to read.
Okay, let's move on then to agenda item 5, which is future agenda items. And so we're looking to see agenda items for next code meeting. And one that has been suggested is more discussion on what developed area is. Do you have any comments on that? Any suggestions for agenda items?
This is Rob East. In regards to developed area, I think some sort of an exhibit sketch, something is really will go a long ways. We'll talk about a bunch of words, but a lot of us see better in pictures, especially when it comes to a site and what we're defining as a developed area. The zoning code has pictures, and that really helps out to define zoning. And some of these borderline zoning type concepts, and the pictures go along.
And for the record, what's your name?
Rob East, E-A-S-T.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to agenda item 6, which is code enforcement. And
hi there, can everyone hear me? This is Lori Pumphrey with Code Enforcement.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. So I'll follow up with a request that was made last time at the last meeting for 2024 lighting specific complaints. And that number I came up with is 99. So that's, I can provide that list to someone who can provide it to the committee if needed. And then additionally, we are still working on adding lighting as a specific choice in our entry form, as well as with our 311 system. For that, we are working with our partner agencies to get that done. So that is moving forward, and hopefully in the next month we can get that to happen. And those are the updates I've had today.
Rob East, Lori, thank you for the update. I don't know if you're aware, but the county provided basically a 5-year look at their complaints. Over 5 years, there's approximately 200 complaints, of which 50 of them were duplicates. And a good portion, I believe, were neighborhood wars because they would rat out each other. There was a couple of addresses that were similar to one another. So I think it really boiled down to over 5 years in the county, it was probably more like 115 complaints.
Okay,
So if you could do a 5-year look back, that'd be great for a good comparison across Pima County.
I will have that. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item 7 on the agenda, call to the audience. And at this point, anyone that wants to offer anything can be recognized.
We got someone online. Medicare counselor. You can unmute. Also, if you could just state your name for the record. Looks like you're still muted. You can also use the chat if you need to.
I'm sorry. we're
They
not
said they
hearing
can't
anything.
unmute. They said that in the chat. You can type it if you like. There shouldn't be anything preventing you from unmuting on this end.
Well, we've got too much dead air. Is there anybody else that wants to speak?
I'd like to say something. This is Priscilla Storm with Diamond Ventures, and I just want to say I appreciate the report of the subcommittee's work in terms of the concept. I agree with the consistency of the definitions. The concept of what is being done with residential, I think would be helpful, and the same in terms of modification on a large campus site when there's an improvement. So I know it's not finalized yet, but I appreciate those simplifications. I would call them.
Well, I'm glad, Ms. Dennis, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, we recognize that this thing is complicated and we want to make it as simple as we can, but it's a complicated problem. We're trying.
Trying to add a little kiss to it, which is great. Keep it simple.
Any other speakers?
So they did say something in the chat.
Okay.
Medicare counselor said, I want to ask about a summary for the public for residential requirements.
Okay, if I'm understanding, then you're thinking that it would be helpful in the code to have a specific summary for residential requirements that's broken out of the code. If that's the case, that's just something we could consider.
Medicare counselor, hopefully that's sufficient. If you could provide more details, we might be able to answer your question more fully. Amy? Or, yeah.
Actually, first, Christina, the person coming on as Medicare counselor has said something else. So if you want to address that first, I can wait. Thanks.
Okay. Not in the code, a separate summary. I want to ask about a summary for the public for residential requirements. Not in the code, a separate summary. So I think that maybe they're asking for a summary.
I think I opened. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yay. Okay.
My name is Eloise, and I'm also a Medicare counselor. And for some reason, when I use Teams, it comes up as Medicare counselor. Sorry. So I live in a homeowners association, and we are trying very hard because as a community, we agree very much with the goals of dark skies and outdoor lighting. I've listened and I've read what you're working on. I used to do regulations myself. This is very difficult. I understand that, and I understand that it's difficult to turn something technical into something that the untechnical among us can understand. But it's very difficult when we're looking at this to piece together things like, well, what do you mean only in a new development? I mean, what does that really mean? That kind of thing, as well as the whole issue with the lumens, which I've heard you talk about. I know you have alternatives to counting lumens, thank goodness. But I just want to express that we're probably not the only community that really wants to understand and follow these rules and have a positive result. But it's very difficult when the code itself is so impenetrable. So a separate summary, something that highlights, here's what the everyday person with a single family home in a community is required to do, and under what circumstances. I'm not clear at all on when it's something new that would require us to pull a permit when we're not installing anything new. It's what we've always had. So what is the requirement then? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mike.
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. I'd just like to point out that several requests have been heard for educational and outreach materials. There was a point made last meeting that when a code enforcement action is taken or any educational materials provided to the property owner, we've heard those requests, we've heard those acknowledgements, and also we are working to gather links to other supporting materials, such as links to Dark Sky International, other presentations, informational documents that are presented by other folks. So we are in the process of trying to assess what sort of educational materials the city can provide as links directly from the city website. So that work is ongoing.
This is Dan with County. On top of that, I have committed to, after we get the draft finalized, that I will put together, or the county crew put together, like a code companion or a code commentary that will give different examples of full cutoff lighting and so forth. Developed area like you were talking about, Rob. But I don't really want to start on that until we get everything finalized.
For sure, for sure.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Dolan. I'd like to
Go
some comments. Can I speak?
Sure.
Yes.
Yes. Can you say your name?
Yeah, I'm Steve Dolan with the Tucson Mountains Association, and I appreciate all the work the lighting committee and the subcommittee have done, and the city and county staffs. I've provided, or TMA has provided comments on the previous drafts because we're primarily concerned about residential lighting, and the focus up to now has primarily been the commercial, which I understand there's a lot more commercial lighting, but there's definitely residential lighting impacts to homeowners and to the wildlife. And I have not seen a subcommittee report. So I think the previous speaker was asking for a summary of some of the changes. For example, the different acreage and the alternate residential table or something instead of arithmetic. And so I think the opportunity for homeowners association and other residential to provide comments at this stage before it goes out to a draft and another round of comments, I think what could be helpful to streamlining the residential component to the code. And my biggest suggestion is that in the previous drafts, there is not a separate chapter for residential. You have to go all over the place to find the residential. So I think in the code, if you put all of the residential lighting requirements and curfew and everything all in one chapter residential, that would make the code much easier. So I'm asking for two things: a summary at this stage, and then in the code, a separate residential chapter. Thank you.
Well, Steve, what I've been working on is all of our lighting zones from E1A to E3 with their specific lumens, and each broken down from an acre, 3/4, half, a third, a quarter, 0.2, 0.13, 0.05, 0.03. And this table, we plan on putting in the code under the residential section so that it's very easy. You don't have to do any calculation at all and say, okay, I get 7,200 lumens based upon the area in which you live as well as the size of your lot.
We also have Amy's hand up. Whenever
Who was just speaking?
That was Craig Barron.
Thank you, Craig. And I'm familiar with the different E-zones. And before there was a table that had the commercial and the residential all combined. So if there's a separate residential section with a separate table for those zones, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
This is Dennis. On that point, though, I was reading more into it than just separating the table, and I think your suggestion was really breaking out residential requirements in, say, a separate part of the code from commercial. I'll commit to at least, we'll discuss that more in subcommittee and see if there's a reasonable way that could be done. Perhaps it's just some editing. It doesn't seem unreasonable to me to attempt that unless it doesn't really provide more clarity.
Thank you.
Okay, and Amy?
Thanks, Christina. So this is Amy. I'm the chair of the committee, those who just came in. And so I also want to just quickly, I have some other comments from before, but I'll address as well. Steve, to Steve Dolan's comment, we are looking at all of the different ways that we can make it easier for residential. We spent quite a lot of time on that in the last subcommittee meeting, which is how we determined to break the tables apart, to make them easier to read, and then to add what Craig was talking about. Craig is also on the subcommittee, for those online who do not know that. Breaking the tables down and then providing that table that's very, very clear for residential, and does all of the calculations for you. So I appreciate that comment and know that we are taking that very seriously. We also live in the county, so it needs to be easy for us too. And so noting that, but I did want to recognize Priscilla in the room and say thank you so much for your comments as well. It's very meaningful to me and to everyone on the subcommittee and the committee that we're finding consensus and finding ways to make it easier for you, and for the development groups as well, because we do want this to work for everyone. So thank you for those comments, and please, everyone, just know, we've been working on this for quite some time, and we are looking forward to the additional open public comment period, and we hope that will be very soon. Thank you.
This is Rick Oliver. Having worked code enforcement, some of my questions is how to deal with existing situations that may be slightly modified in these, because then this changes a lot based on what it is, not just residential, but commercial and stuff like that being looked at. Example would be a set of lights that were put in compliance with heights of poles, but now the complaints come in due to lighting because of the height, they can't see even if it shows them light. And now the code says they have to cut off that pole or get a new 10-foot pole along that boundary. Whereas before, it was installed in code.
Yeah, well, sure. This is Dennis. Let me address that, which I think maybe this will help us. Yes.
Amy, can you reiterate, online, we're getting a little bit of muffling. Can you just reiterate that comment before you address it?
To summarize, Rick was asking about the problem with existing installations that may have been okay when they went in, but now they are not compliant with the code. And so complaints are being developed because people think that things don't meet code. And that is what this Dennis now, what I wanted to address, which is that this code is being written for new work or new modifications or replacement of lighting. If you have a legally installed light, that means it was put in with permits and met the code at the time it was installed, it can be continued and it's not out of code for it to keep operating. So there could be a situation in the city limits, there was no lighting code prior to 1972. If you've got a very old installation with lighting that's that old, you can continue to keep that lighting running regardless of how bad it is for light pollution, for annoying your neighbors, whatever. If it was legal, it can be continued. There probably isn't a whole lot of that left anymore because now those installations will be over 50 years old. And that's where it gets a little more touchy because there were many legal installations that say we're 20 years old, don't meet these new rules. They could continue, but many people elect to change out their lighting and they do it without permits and they do it without the education of what you're supposed to do. When you do change out the old lighting, you're supposed to replace it with lighting that complies with the code that's adopted at the time that replacement was made. And that's where the problems are coming in many cases, particularly with the wrong color temperature. Because of the LED lights, people can buy lighting from sources, sellers that don't know the rules. They sell lights that have way too much blue light in them, and they are ruining the dark sky every time that goes in. Those lights also are often perceived as being more glare than a warmer source as well. So, yeah, if you could have an old installation that has been altered and the alteration didn't meet code, then that could be subject to enforcement to bring it up to code. But if you had an old installation that was legal when it went in, the proper response from code enforcement is going to be no, there's no violation here. But it's hard because the lighting codes have been continually being updated. From 1972 is the oldest code all the way to now. Every 3 years there's been updates on the code. That historical data I think is available. The governments have it. In my own work I have that. So I often advise people what they can do and what they can't do. But, yeah, it's a difficult judgment and it does, I hope code enforcement is fair about it. Go ahead, Rick.
On your clarification, this was a commercial project. The poles and lighting was put in. Now they decided to change out just the luminaire head. The luminaire head was installed with leak, the pipes were cut off and all that. But it's now in a pole along the border boundary line that is above 10 foot. So that pole and those 2 to 3 lights that are on the boundary line, the ones in the parking lot, further away from meet the requirements for the duty. But does those 3, does that mean they have to get 3 new poles? and or cut those poles down to meet the 10-foot height requirement.
You want to interrupt me?
This is Clayton with the city of Tucson. So from what I'm hearing is that there was a lawful installment of poles and lamps that met the code at the time, and then at a later date, the lamps were changed, but the poles were not. There would be nothing in the code that would require those poles to be changed because they were lawfully permitted.
Okay, so the light fixture
But the
has,
fixture may not be legal at that time
Right.
anymore if they're changing the fixture.
So this is Clayton again. Just to back up to a premise of how the codes are applied generally, from a code application standpoint, the item that is being modified in a lawful installation has to meet the current code. But that doesn't necessarily mean that everything else has to meet it. For example, if you do a bathroom renovation and you replace fixtures, those new fixtures have to meet the current code, but that doesn't mean the rest of the house does. Okay, and so that's kind of what I'm trying to get at. If a permit was obtained to install poles and lamps, and it met the time, it is allowed to stay that way, even if they change out portions of that element in order to, but the portions that are modified have to meet the new code. So the new fixtures installed on those poles need to meet the code, but the poles do not.
my question is, how do they meet that? Because the new code says those fixtures cannot be higher than 10 foot, and the pole itself is 20.
This is Craig, that's on a new installation. On the existing installation, the problem with changing out an existing commercial application is that the owner of the property doesn't have a contractor who knows about lamp distributions of the fixtures. Because if they used a forward throw distribution, that would keep less light going back into the neighbor's light. Normally they'll just put a type 5 distribution or a type 3, and that throws light outside the property boundary. The only way to fix that is to put a house side shield on those fixtures to modify that. So if the parking lot owner wants to be a good neighbor and respond to the people who are complaining, then he would do house side shields.
I agree. That would be something that would be an alternative to doing that, would be outside shielding like you're talking. But that would be something, I guess, when they submitted for permitting, to have that shown in there. But does that then meet the new requirements?
Well, see, the city and county really, the inspectors really don't know about the different distributions of the fixtures of type 4, which is what's considered a forward throw. Throws a light away from the back end, which goes beyond the property line. And that's just not what the owners buy. They just buy, whatever they do because people don't know that.
Okay, I think you've answered my question in a roundabout way. Yes, thank you.
For the record, that was Rick.
And Craig.
Clayton, the new federal kind of ADA offsite guidelines are very contrary to what you said in regards to codes. They're having it set up where you touch something, it's a domino effect. So it's kind of opposite of the building codes. So you want to keep that in mind in the evolution of codes.
Thank you.
Do we have any other people that want to address the?
I have a question on.
Can you say your name for the record?
Priscilla Storm, Diamond Ventures, and in this context, Rocky Cape Development. When you refer to festoon lights, is that what would be considered holiday lighting? Is that something else? String lighting, so that would be the bistro lights as well as possibly holiday lighting.
Yeah, this is Dennis. Let me address it. So holiday lighting, by the definition, is short term, and it could include those string lights or what people would call Christmas lights, the colored lights. But those would not specifically be required to be permitted, but they're only allowed to be used at a very short period of time. It's when they get permanently installed, at that point, they really are part of the permanent outdoor lighting installation. So we're thinking that those do need to be addressed one way or another. They can be addressed by just acknowledging that they're unshielded light and they're calculated that way and that they're controlled that way, which means they have to fit the lumen cap for what's allowed for that project, and they have to be turned off at 11 p.m. Now, the option to that, if you still want to have the string light look, is there are commercially available string light either assemblies or retrofitted little hats that can be put on them that will turn that light bulb that is putting light in every direction and tap the light that's going up and turn it into a fully shielded light. If those are used, now they would be considered fully shielded, then they fit under the much higher lumen cap, and they don't have the curfew, so they can stay on later. So the goal is to, the uplight is so much more damaging for dark skies compared to fully shielded lighting that we're trying to incentivize people to put as much fully shielded in as possible. That's why we're looking at that.
So the challenge that the homeowners association is having in Rocky Cay has to do with the Bovee lights that are the LED lights that are square, they're not hanging, they're square and sort of stapled on the fascia under the roof lights. And they are being installed as holiday lights, but they're being kept on.
Yeah, and we recognize that it's such an enforcement issue. I mean, it's not going to get enforced, and so it becomes a non-conforming source. And I think we in the committee are, you know, how much do we say no to all this stuff?
Well, this is correct, if they're under the eave, it depends how far back they are under the eave, it could be they're considered a fully shielded source, so the eave is acting as the shield. Now, the big thing would be the color temperature. Is it a lower, is it a warmer like these lights here, or is it cooler like that?
Well, you know, they have 72 different color settings, so whenever they're athletic game playoffs or any Wildcat games, they're red and blue lights there. And whatever else is, at Easter, they're pink and purple and orange and, you know, all of those kinds of things. So they're really using the color spectrum on the Bovee lights, which are, we have asked homeowners to take them down, and they have appealed to the board. They're very expensive to put, they're expensive lights compared to a traditional string light, you know, that kind of thing.
Well,
For the record, that's Priscilla.
this is Craig, Clayton and Dan, would there be an issue with something like that if they were turned off at 11 p.m. as part of the curfew?
Well, this is Dan with Pima County. In my mind, if they are truly full shielded lights under canopy, I don't know how they are, then they don't count towards any lumen cap. If they're not, then they still need permit to ensure we're within the lumen caps for the lot. However, what I don't know is necessarily how you would account for the different color temperatures used on them. But that's something we can look at.
Because I mean, they're tiny little things.
No, I know. In all fairness, pictures Priscilla had sent me, they're pretty bright when there's a whole.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
These are the things that are going in on the smoke shops as well.
I'm not.
And the companies that sell them did buy advertising during the Super Bowl, significant amount of advertising during the Super Bowl. So we saw a plethora of installation post Super Bowl.
For the record,
This is like with the city. I just want to also reiterate what's being discussed for anybody that's online that hasn't been able to hear clearly. The premise of the question started, are holiday lighting considered festoon lighting or vice versa? And the response thus far is holiday lighting is temporary in nature. It can only be provided during certain times of the year. For short periods of time, otherwise it doesn't qualify as holiday lighting. So, I would concur with what Dan Ice just said regarding the shielding and the color temperature. If the light doesn't qualify for that short-term period of holiday lighting, it would need to meet the lighting code as it relates to the lumen limits, the color temperature, and shielding in general.
This is Rick. Priscilla, clarify with me. I believe these are not string lights. They're a running strip that is controlled by a controller that can be mounted on or wherever on the structure, such as a residence, and then they can control it by changing colors. I believe I've seen one of them out in my neighborhood where it goes along the house under the eaves like you would for Christmas lighting, but it's not the same. It's a running strip that the whole strip changes color, not just spots. What I see, so it's a continuous.
You can do both. I'm talking about the ones that are spots. They're little square LED lights,
Okay.
and then they have a strand, and then another. If you look up GOVEE, GOV lights, you will see what
It's
these
just a
are.
little tiny LEDs, they're just about that big, you know, they're not big squares, they're
They're,
tiny little things.
yeah, they're maybe 2 by 2.
I mean, it's not a cost though, like this is the future of lighting is, you know, Bluetooth, different colors, all over. So I think if we're not gonna do this again for another, 14 years, we should take these things into consideration, right?
But if they're along the eave, they should be covered by the fully shielded fixture. If they're doing what Woody said, you know, going on the side of the house, that's not fully shielded.
And I've seen people do both where they install them underneath the eaves, and I've seen people install them like on the outside of the house.
That's not legal.
Yeah.
Okay, let me, this is Dennis, let me jump into this again. So I don't think this is the forum that we can address all the technical issues. In general, though, let me say that I think all of us on the subcommittee and the full committee recognize that there's continually changing light sources. We're not going to be able to catch everything. And I'm aware of many holes that are in the code right now. For example, we really don't address monochromatic colored lighting systems at all yet in the code. I thought we need to do that. We just have not had time to get to that point. And given when we need to get a code adopted, I don't know if we'll get there in this code cycle. But with what I've heard of that issue, what I've heard of other discussion Rick brought up, what I've heard the people online talk about, we've got more issues in subcommittee. I think we'll talk about these things and see if we think it's something we can do along with the timeline that we're trying to work to get something wrapped up so this just doesn't keep going on and on. If we can't get it in this code adoption cycle, I don't think we're done reviewing the code. We'll continue for next time. But thank you for bringing that up because maybe we needed a code on it. We're just about done to call to the audience. Any others?
There is something in the chat that came in about 6 minutes ago. John B said, I would note that fully shielded string bistro festoon lighting that's shielded by an overhang can still be a source of nuisance and light trespass.
Acknowledged. Okay, with no other comments, item 8 is adjournment.
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
We have a second. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.